Hello everyone, welcome to lecture 7 on animal kingdom. So till now we learned about different phyla which belong to kingdom Animalia. So till now we learned about phylum Porifera, phylum Coelentrates, phylum Ctenophora, phylum Platyhelminthes, phylum Eschhelminthes, phylum Annelid, phylum Arthropoda. In today's class, we will learn about a different phyla, which is the phylum Mollusca. So, starting with the basic characteristics, we know that all the organisms that belong to kingdom Animalia are multicellular, that is, they are made up of many cells. Also, they are heterotrophic in nature, that is, they cannot make up their own food, they are dependent on other organisms for their food. Next, they can be divided on the basis of the level of organization. We have already covered the cellular level of organization, which is seen in the poriferans. Now we are discussing about the organisms that have an organ system level of organization. That is, they have well-developed organ system like excretory system, reproductive system. They have well-developed excretory, circulatory, reproductive system. So we are talking about the organ system here. Then we divided the organisms on the basis of the symmetry. So we have discussed about the radial symmetry, which was seen in coelentrates and ctenophore. And we are discussing about the organisms that show bilateral symmetry. And we are focusing on the coelomates that have the true body cavity. That is, they have the true body cavity. Right? So they are coelomates. In coelomates also, we have already discussed about annelids. We have discussed about arthropods like insects in the last lecture. And in today's lecture, we will focus on the next phyla, which is the mollusk. So we will be focusing on the characteristics of mollusca and what is the different classes which are present under the phylum mollusca and kingdom Animalia. So today our lecture will focus on the organisms that belong to kingdom Animalia, that have an organ system level of organization, that have bilateral symmetry. They are coelomates, that is, they have true body cavity, and they belong to phylum Mollusca. So the mollusk or the phylum Mollusca is the second most numerous group of animals. So this is the second most numerous group. We know that the first one is the arthropods, which are the very successful organisms that belongs to the phylum arthropods. They are highly successful in terms of evolution also. And the second most numerous group of animals is the phylum Mollusca. Approximately 93,000 species of mollusks are known. And again, just like arthropods, they also inhabit a variety of environments. Like they are found in marine water, they are found in fresh water, they are terrestrial, that is, they are present on the land as well. So they habitat a large variety of environments like marine water, fresh water, or terrestrial environment. They also vary in size from microscopic to giant squid. So they might be microscopic, very tiny, or they may be large enough, which like the giant squid. For example, the giant squid, which can length over the 20 meter and it can weigh over 450 kilograms. So therefore, the size varies significantly. Some of the organisms are microscopic in nature, that is, they can be visualized only with the help of the microscope. They cannot be seen with the naked eyes, while there are some large animals like the giant squid that can have a length of 20 meter and can weigh over the 450 kilograms. The group includes, like, they have variety of animals that have variety of feeding habits also. So the group includes animals which are herbivores, that are dependent on the plants directly, carnivores, which in turn are dependent on the herbivores, that is, they eat the herbivores, filter feeders, or they may be parasitic in nature. So therefore, the group includes a variety of animals that inhabit variety of environment that vary greatly in size, and also they vary differently in the feeding habits. So some of them might be herbivores, some of them might be carnivores, they may be filter feeders, or they may be parasites as well. Now, why the term mollusk? So till now we know about every phyla. Like for example, when we were learning about arthropods, we get to know why they are termed as arthropods. Arthro means jointed, and pods means appendages, right? So the organisms that have jointed appendages. Similarly, we learn about many other phyla. The name is derived from the characteristics. So the mollusk term is derived from the Latin word which is mollusks, that means soft. So they are the soft-bodied animals. That is, these organisms have soft body. So they are soft-bodied animals, and hence the term mollusk. So these animals are very, like their body is really soft, and therefore most of them secrete a hard protective shell which is made up of calcium carbonate. So their body is soft, but they contain a protective shell. So they secrete a hard protective shell as an outer covering which is made up of calcium carbonate around the body to protect the body from desiccation, from the injury. So this shell protects the organism from injury, from desiccation, etc. Because the body is really soft, it may undergo desiccation also. So in order to prevent the loss of water from the body, or in order to prevent the drying of the cells, the body is covered with a shell which is made up of calcium carbonate in most of the cases. However, there are certain mollusks that we will see later in the lecture, for example. So we will see later that there are certain mollusks which do not secrete this protective shell which is made up of calcium carbonate. Mollusks, as I mentioned, are triploblastic. That is, they have all the three germ layers during the time of development: ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. And they are true coelomates. That is, they have the true coelom, true body cavity. So they have the body cavity, and they have an organ system level of organization. So the level of organization is organ system level of organization. So once we will go through that table like which I described here, we will get to know about most of the basic characteristics of any phyla. So this table is really important to remember. This figure is really important. So if we remember that figure, we will easily remember these characteristics of any phyla. Like for example, mollusks are triploblastic. They are coelomates. They have an organ system level of organization. Body is unsegmented. So unlike arthropods, where the body was segmented, where the body was divided into three parts like head, thorax, and abdomen, and in some cases the abdomen was segmented. In some cases the segments was present on the head as well. In this case, in the case of mollusk, the body is unsegmented. That is, there is no segmentation, and the variety of shapes and can be seen in case of mollusk. So we will see that some may have maybe bivalve, some may be round, some may be of different other shapes. So therefore their body is unsegmented, they have a variety of shapes, and they are covered with the calcareous shell, as I mentioned, the shell which is made up of calcium carbonate. So they have a shell which is made up of calcium carbonate. However, there is an exception to the unsegmented body, the neoplena. This organism belongs to phylum Mollusca, but it is exceptionally segmented. So this exception you may remember, this might be asked because this is an exception. Otherwise, in general, the mollusca are unsegmented. They are bilaterally symmetrical. For example, you can see in this figure. So this is a bivalve example. So the figure is like this. In this one is the right valve. This one is the left valve. So this is a figure of a clam that belongs to the class bivalve that we will see later. So this is a figure of a clam. You can see that this can be divided into two equal halves through this axis of symmetry. So this is the axis of symmetry, and the body can be divided into two equal halves through this axis of symmetry. This is the left valve, this is the right valve. and this is the plane of symmetry dividing the body into two equal halves. So this is the mollusk are bilaterally symmetrical, since it can only be divided into two equal halves through the single axis, that is this. If I try to divide the organism into two equal halves from this axis, it will not be symmetrical. Therefore, only one axis of symmetry is present. And however, in some cases, few are secondarily asymmetrical. For example, snails. So in snails, you might have seen that snails are quite like this, show a torsion. That is, they are slightly twisted towards one side. So this twisting in these snails leads to their asymmetrical nature. Because of this twisting, they cannot be divided into two symmetrical halves. Therefore, this twisting of these snails is the reason for their asymmetry. So, in most of the cases, the mollusks are bilaterally symmetrical. However, there are some cases, for example, in snails, which undergo twisting or torsion during the growth, and this twisting or torsion therefore leads to the asymmetry in them. So, if I start with the basic anatomy of this phylum, so what we will see is although we see that mollusks are highly diverse, we will see later also the different classes of mollusks. So they are quite diverse. They are present in different habitats. But usually, what we can say is that mollusks share a three-part body plan. That is, their body can be divided into, like they have their body, we can divide into a plan which consists of three parts. The first one is the visceral mass. The second one is the mental, and third one is the foot. So the first one is the visceral mass, mental, and foot. So the basic body plan of any mollusk can be divided into three body parts, three-part body: visceral, mental, and foot. So this is a basic anatomy. We can see that this is the foot, this is the visceral mass. So if I take out the laser pointer, this is the visceral mass, this is the foot, and this is the mental cavity. So in general, what we see is that most of the organs are present in the visceral mass, like the digestive. This is the visceral mass. This region is the visceral mass. So most of the organs, like you can see heart, gonad, or for example, the digestive glands, etc., are present in the visceral mass. So the visceral mass contains the internal organs, including a highly specialized digestive tract, pair of kidneys, and reproductive organs. So gonad, which is a part of reproductive organ, digestive gland, which is a part of digestive system, etc., are the part of visceral mass. So the visceral mass contains all the internal organs that contains, like example, digestive tract, kidney, etc. Next is the mental. So we can see this mental here. This mental is the outer covering. You can see it here. I am highlighting mental here. So mental is the outer covering. So this is the outer covering, which is the mental. Right? So this is the outer covering. So the mental is a covering that lies to either side of, but does not completely enclose the visceral mass. So it does not completely enclose it, but it lies on both the sides of the visceral mass, protecting the visceral mass, basically protecting the internal organs. And the foot is a muscular organ, we know. So the foot region is a muscular organ that may be adapted for locomotion. It may also help in the attachment. It may help in the food capturing, or a combination of functions can be played by the foot. So therefore, the body, there is a three-part body plan in the mollusk, which consists of visceral mass, mental, and foot. The visceral mass consists of the internal organs that mainly contains digestive tract, kidney, which is a part of excretory system, reproductive organ, etc. Mental is the covering that lies on both the side of the visceral mass but does not completely enclose the visceral mass. And foot is a muscular organ that helps in the locomotion or in capturing of the food, etc. Right? So mental may secrete, so as I mentioned, the mental is the covering that covers the visceral mass. So it secretes a shell and contribute to the development of gills or lungs. So you can see here that this is the mental cavity. This is the mental cavity here. You can see here, this is the mental cavity. And in here, the gill is present. Right? In the mental cavity, that is in the space. So the space between the folds of the mental is called the mental cavity. And another important feature that is present in mollusk is the different kind of organ, which is a tongue-like organ, which is the radula. So you can see here that this part is highlighting the mouth. The mouth contains the organ radula. Radula, you can see here in this figure, in the zoomed in figure of the radula, that they are the teeth-like structures. So this is the radula teeth. You can see here, this is the radula teeth. Right? So basically, another important feature which is present in mollusk is a rasping tongue-like radula. So it is a rasping tongue-like radula, an organ that bears many rows of teeth. So you can see here, like these are the radular teeth. And radula is a tongue-like organ that bears rows of tiny teeth that point backwards. So therefore it is help in obtaining the food. So this is important feature, which is the radula, which is present in the mouth of the mollusk, which is a teeth-like structure, like tongue-like structure that contains the teeth that we called as radular teeth also. But although these animals are coelomates, what we see is that, so although these animals are coelomates, they have true coelom, that is they are coelomates, but the coelom is highly reduced because we can see that the body cavity is reduced. It is occupied by the organs which are getting developed with time, as we see that they have an organ system level of organization. So they have a heart, they have gills for the respiration, they have pair of kidneys. So as the organs are increasing, therefore the body cavity reduced. So the body cavity or the true coelom is reduced and is largely limited to the region around the heart in the mollusk. So it is mainly, you can see here that in this, we can see that the body cavity is usually predominant. The coelom is usually, you can clearly visualize around the heart. Mostly around the heart, it is visible. It is limited to the region which is around the heart in the mollusk. So it is limited to the limited near the heart only, as most of the region is occupied by the other organs. Most mollusks have an open circulatory system. However, there are certain, as I am saying, most mollusks, therefore there are certain exceptions that have closed circulatory system as well. We will see them, that what are those examples. In this, since they have an open circulatory system, we know that the heart pumps the blood directly into the sinus, which is the cavity. So the heart pumps the blood, more properly called the hemolymph. We know that in this case, we call the blood as hemolymph. And it is similar to the interstitial fluid. Since it is an open circulatory system, there are no concept of blood vessels. Therefore, the hemolymph is same as the interstitial fluid. And through vessels, it is finally released into the sinuses, which is the cavities, collectively called as the hemocoel. So hemo means blood. We know hemo word is related to blood, and seal means cavity. We know. So hemocoel. So it is the cavity. So basically, it is released into the hemocoel. As I mentioned in the last class also, in some arthropods also we see that they have a hemocyanin as a pigment rather than the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, which is a respiratory pigment in vertebrates like humans. Hemocyanin is the respiratory pigment in most of the arthropods and in mollusks. So it is blue in color. Why? Because it is cyanin. Cyanin means copper. Cyanin word is related to copper. And since copper is present, therefore this gives the color blue to this pigment, right? This hemocyanin, because of the presence of copper, which is giving it a blue color. So the color of the blood in this case is blue due to the presence of a pigment which is hemocyanin instead of hemoglobin. Nutrients and oxygen diffuse into the tissues from these sinuses instead of being carried into the tissues by capillaries because they have an open circulatory system. Like for example, in closed circulatory system, we see that microscopic blood vessels are present that diffuse the nutrients and oxygen into the tissues. But in this case, from the sinus directly, the nutrient and oxygen is carried into the tissues. The nervous system, if I talk about the nervous system of mollusk, it consists of several ganglia. It is connected by the nerve cords. The amount of cephalization, that is the brain development and the head part which is occupied, and sensory organs varies from non-existent in clams. For example, in clams, you will see that cephalization is almost absent. Fine. To complex in squid and octopus. So there are various sense organs which are present. For example, the first one is the eye, which is present over a stalk called omatophore in some mollusks. Statocyst or lithocyst for body equilibrium in the foot. So this is helping in maintaining the body equilibrium. And third one is the osphradium. Osphradium is a chemoreceptor or an olfactory receptor. So chemoreceptor is something that senses the chemical. Olfactory receptor is something that senses the smell. Sense of smell. So chemoreceptor and the olfactory receptor for testing chemical nature of water, for example, pH. So osphradium is a receptor that helps in which is a receptor for chemoreceptor or olfactory receptor. Statocyst or lithocyst helps in maintaining the body equilibrium in the foot. And eyes, the sense organ which is present over a stalk called omatophore in some mollusks. The mollusks also exhibit variation in mobility. For example, there are certain mollusks which are sessile. That is, they are fixed, they do not move. They do not move. While there are certain, for example, snails that are extremely slow moving. We know snails are very slow moving. Squid, which are fast moving and are really active predators. So depending upon what are their feeding habits also, like for example, oysters are sessile. They are present on the surface and they feed on the planktons, while snails are extremely slow moving and squid are the fast moving active predators. So since they are predators, they have to be fast moving. They have to catch the prey. Most mollusks are dioecious. Dioecious, we know, I have already discussed in most of the classes. Dioecious means the male and female are different. That is, the male reproductive organ is present in a different organism and female reproductive organ is present in different organism. That is, two organisms are needed for the fertilization. Two organisms are needed for the fertilization. Because male and female reproductive system are present in different organisms. And the fertilization usually occurs externally. That is, the sperms are released outside in the environment. Egg is also released outside in the environment. Sperm comes in contact with the egg. It fuses. The fusion happens and the fertilization takes place. So the fertilization is external, that is, it takes place outside the body of the female. In some mollusks, as I mentioned when I was talking about some other phyla, that the zygote hatches and undergoes two larval stages. So we have already learned about procophore larva. So in some mollusks, zygote hatches and undergoes two larval stages, that is the procophore and veliger, before becoming a young adult. However, in some cases like bivalves, which is a class of mollusk, phylum mollusca. So it is a class of phylum mollusca with a third larval stage, which is a glochidia. So this is the summary of different organ system that we discussed. So firstly, we discussed that they have a visceral mass, they have mental, then they have foot. So by color scheme, you can see here, whatever is marked here in this color. So all this is inside the visceral mass. This part, that is the gonads, the digestive system consists of stomach, mouth, esophagus, etc. are all part of the visceral mass. Mantle is the outer covering that helps in the releasing in the outer covering. So it helps in the shell formation. Gills are the organs that help in the respiration. Anus is the outer opening that helps in releasing the waste. And then we have foot. So you can see that this is the foot that helps in the locomotion. So if I talk about the circulatory system, we know that most of them have the open circulatory system. So they have dorsally located heart pumps, circulating fluid called the hemolymph through the arteries into the sinuses. The organs of the mollusk are thus continuously bathed in the hemolymph. So organs are directly bathed. Organs are continually bathed in hemolymph. So what does that mean? This means that this is usually happen in the open circulatory system. And you can see that they have a long digestive tract here. So this is the long digestive tract. They have a proper digestive system. They have a mouth. They have a stomach that consists of enzymes. So they have hepatopancreatic enzymes. So they have hepatopancreas, and then they have esophagus, which is the food pipe. And they have stomach. Then they have a long digestive tract through which the food undergoes digestion and absorption, and finally the undigested food is removed out with the help of the anus. Is thrown out with the help of the anus. So the long digestive tract is called in the visceral mass. In the mouth, as I mentioned, they have radula, which is the rasp-like feeding organ, and it is this belt of backward curved teeth repeatedly thrust outward and then retracts into the mouth, scraping and scooping like a backhoe. So this just perform the scraping action and help in catching the food, obtaining the food. The nervous system consists of, as I mentioned, a nerve ring around the esophagus from which the nerve cords extend. So you can see here, around the esophagus, this nerve ring extended, and this nerve ring is present, and this is extending as a nerve cord into the dorsal region. So in the nephridia, nephridium is the excretory organ called nephridia. Excretory organs called nephridia remove the metabolic waste from the hemolymph. All these are the different parts which are present, and they have different organ system, as I mentioned. So they have well-developed circulatory system, they have well-developed digestive system, nervous system, and excretory system. Now it comes the classification of this phylum. So mollusks can be classified into 7 different classes based on some differences which are present in the organisms belonging to these classes. So the first class is Aplacophora. The second is Monoplacophora. The third one is the Polyplacophora. Next is Bivalvia. The next class is Gastropoda. Next class is Cephalopoda. And the last class is Scaphopoda. So the first one is Aplacophora, second is Monoplacophora, third one is Polyplacophora. Fourth is Bivalvia, fifth is Gastropoda, sixth is Cephalopoda, and last one is the Scaphopoda. So these are the 7 classes in which the phylum Mollusca can be divided. So we will learn about these one by one. The first one is the Aplacophora. So as the name suggests, bearing no plates. So Monoplacophora will be bearing 1 plate. Polyplacophora will be bearing many plates. Fine. So class Aplacophora bears no plate. It includes worm-like animals primarily found in the benthic marine habitats. You can see here they are worm-like in structures. They have a posterior chamber in which, and they have a mouth through which they takes up the food. Then they have a ventral groove. The most of the epidermis is covered with the aragonite spicules on the epidermis, and they lack the calcareous shell. So calcareous shell, which is present in most of the mollusks, is absent in Aplacophora. They have a rudimentary mental cavity, like their mental cavity is also not well developed. It's of no use because obviously they do not have shell. Mental cavity, main function of the mental cavity, as we mentioned, is that it secretes the shell. So they have rudimentary mental cavity and they lack eyes, tentacles, and nephridia. So they are very a primitive type of mollusk. You can say that like some sense organs as well. They lack excretory organs as well. They have rudimentary mental cavity. So they are worm-like structures and they lack the shell. The next is the monoplacophora. So as the name suggests, as I mentioned, aplacophora means bearing no plate. Monoplacophora means bearing one plate. It possesses a single cap-like shell that encloses the body. So the morphology of the shell and the underlying animal can vary from circular to ovate, and a looped digestive system, multiple pairs of excretory organs, many gills, and a pair of gonads is present in these animals. So like basically the many like looped digestive system, excretory organs, many gills, etc. are present in these animals, unlike aplacophora, where the excretory organs or nephridia was absent. The monoplacophorans were believed extinct, and only when the discovery of Neoplania glathea was done in 1952, it was found that they are still existing. So this is the dorsal view of the monoplacophoran, in which there is a single plate. You can see here, this is a single plate that acts as a shell, and this is the ventral view. In the ventral view, this is the anterior lip, which is present above the mouth. The mouth helps in and taking up the food, and they have phylum, post-oral tentacles. Tentacles were absent in aplacophora, while they are present in monoplacophora. Then they have mental, which was reduced or rudimentary in aplacophora, but is present in this. And they have foot. So they have well-developed foot that helps in the attachment or in movement. They have pedial groove. They have tenidia. So tenidia are the gills. Tenidiums are the gills. So this is a tenidia, and they have gills 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs of like 5 pairs. Then they have anus that helps in excreting out the waste, and this is the outer covering, which is the shell. This white portion is the shell. So this, like, they are comparatively well developed as compared to the aplacophora. The next is polyplacophora, as the name suggests, bearing many plates. They are commonly known as chitons, and they bear an armor-like 8-plate shell. This is really important. They have an 8-plated shell. So these animals have a broad ventral foot that is adapted for suction to the rocks and other substrates, and mental that extends beyond the shell in the form of a girdle. So calcareous spines may be present on the girdle to offer the extra protection from predators. Respiration, as we see in case of monoplacophora, here also it is facilitated by the presence of tenidia, which is the gills that are present ventrally. The animal possesses a radula. We see that they have radula in the mouth, which is a teeth-like structure. The animal possesses a radula, which is a teeth-like structure that is modified for scraping. The nervous system is not well developed. It is rudimentary with only the buccal or cheek ganglia present at the anterior end. Eye spots are absent in these animals, not like just like aplacophora where the eye spots were absent. A single pair of nephridia is present for the excretion. So this is, you can see here, this is an example of a polyplacophora, which is the chiton. So it has 8 plates. So this is, if we start counting, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is the 8th plate. So they are 8 plates. This is an important characteristic. So this is a shell characteristic of mollusk in the clade polyplacophora. So this is, if we see, this is the anterior wall, this is the posterior wall, and on the anterior side we have mouth which is present, then we have tenidia, gills, then we see that the mental is extended up to the girdle. We see here now, like we learned about this girdle, that the mental extends beyond the shell in the form of a girdle. So girdle is present, then we have a foot which is flat. So we see here also that the foot, so the ventral foot is present and it is adapted for the suction. So you can see here that the foot is adapted for the suction, And then they have an anus, which is the opening that excrete out the waste material, undigested waste material. The next class is the class Gastropoda. So name itself suggests gastro is related to stomach, right? So animals in the class Gastropoda means stomach food. It includes well-known mollusks like snails, slugs, conch, sea hares, and sea butterflies. So Gastropoda includes shell-bearing species as well as species with a reduced shell. So they have both type of species. In some of them, they have shell, while in some others, they have reduced shell. The animals are asymmetrical in nature. So as I mentioned, most of the mollusks are bilaterally symmetrical. However, there are certain exceptions. For example, gastropods, which are asymmetrical. They are usually present a coiled shell. So as I mentioned, snails, for example, they are slightly twisted. Due to this twisting or torsion, the snails lose their symmetry. So therefore, these animals are asymmetrical and they usually present a coiled shell. The visceral mass in the shelled species display torsion around the perpendicular axis on the center of the foot, which is the key characteristic. So this torsion or this twisting is the key characteristic of this group. And along with the foot, that is modified. The foot is modified for crawling. Here, the foot is modified for crawling, while in case of Polyplacophora, the foot was modified for the suction. That is helping in the attachment with the substrate, right? Most gastropods bear a head with tentacles. They have well-developed tentacles, eyes, and a style, omitted that we discussed. A complex radula is used by the digestive system and aids in the ingestion of the food. The mental cavity encloses the ctenidia as well as a pair of nephridia. So ctenidia is again the gill, and they have a pair of nephridia for the excretion, right? So this is the example of snail. So this is the mouth and this is the anus. You can see here that the anus is really close to the mouth here because of the twisting. So because of this twisting or the torsion, the anus has come close to the mouth. This is the mental cavity. This is stomach and this is intestine. So the result of torsion in a gastropod, because of a torsion, yeah, twisting of the visceral mass during embryonic development, the digestive tract is coiled. You can see here the digestive tract is highly coiled and the anus is near the anterior end of the animal. Right? Unlike this, you can see here the anus is present on the posterior, towards the posterior wall, towards the posterior end. While in this case, the anus is present on the anterior end because of the twisting or torsion. This is an important characteristic. Like the important character is the torsion or the twisting which is present in gastropods, because of which the digestive tract gets highly coiled and the anus is present on the anterior end instead of the posterior end. So instead of the posterior end, the anus is present on the anterior end near the mouth. They have well-developed tentacles, they have well-developed eyes, they have well-developed nephridia as well. So these are examples. For example, a land snail, and this is a sea slug. So this is important, as I mentioned, that this group, gastropods, consist of animals which have shell as well as animals which have lost the shell. So the snails consist of shell, they have a shell protective covering, while if I talk about a sea slug, which is the nudibranch or sea slugs lost their shell during the evolution. So these are animals that belong to phylum mollusk class Gastropoda, but these lack the shells. So sea slugs are the example that do not have shell, right? So they do not have shell while the land snail have the shell. The next is the bivalvia. So bivalvia, as the name suggests, two shells. It includes clams, oysters, mussels, scallops, and geoducks. Members of this class are found in marine as well as in freshwater habitats. Name suggests bivalves are enclosed in a pair of shells. Bivalves, right? Bi means two. So therefore, they are enclosed in a pair of shells. You can see here, this is the first shell, this is the second shell. Valves are commonly called as shells that are hinged at the dorsal end by the ligaments as well as the shell teeth. So they are jointed here. This is the hinged portion, the joint portion, where the two shells are joined. The overall morphology you can see here is usually literally flattened. Head region is poorly developed. Eye spots and statocyst may be absent in some species, while if you will see in this example, they have dark blue spots which are eye spots. These animals are suspension feeders. So they eat materials like planktons that suspend over the surface of water. So they are, suppose this is the surface of water. Here they feed upon the planktons, which are the small plants that are present on the surface of water, and therefore they are suspension feeders. The class of mollusk like a radula, because we know that the function of radula is mostly scraping. Sorry for the error in the spelling. The function of scapula, this we can relate ourselves also, like, right? Because when we know the function of radula is scraping, and these animals do not need any scraping tool because they are suspension feeders. They feed on the planktons. Therefore, they do not require radula as such, and therefore the radula is absent. A pair of ctenidia facilitate respiration, whereas a pair of nephridia bring about the excretion and the osmoregulation. They often possess a large mantle cavity. In some species, posterior edges of the mantle may fuse to form the two siphons. So there is one incurrent siphon and one that is towards the outer side, that is excurrent. So one is to take in and the other one is to exude the water. One of the functions of the mantle is to secrete the shell. Some bivalves are like, for example, we know oyster and mussels. They possess a unique ability where they can secrete and deposit a calcareous nacre or mother of pearl around the foreign particle. Whenever these organisms take up any foreign particles, they secrete some shell-like structure and resulting in the formation of the pearl. So you might have seen that the pearls are obtained from the oysters or the mussels. So therefore, since the pearls we know are very expensive, therefore this property has been commercially exploited to produce the pearls. So these are the natural pearls. Pearls are usually originated from these sources, like from oysters. So this is an anatomy of a clam. Clam belongs to this bivalvia. You can see here that they have mantle cavity well developed. They have well developed gonads, they have gills, and they have incurrent siphon, as I mentioned, through which the water flow takes place, and then they have excurrent siphon through which the water is exuded out, that is exuded out from the body. So they have two siphons, which I want to show you here. Like they have incurrent through this figure, they have an incurrent siphon and they have an excurrent siphon. The body is again surrounded by mantle. They have an hinge areas because they are bivalves, therefore they have an hinge area where both the shells, this is the upper shell, this is the lower shell, so they have an hinge area where the shells gets attached. So food particles suspended in water enters through the incurrent siphon, are collected by the gills. So these are then collected by the gills, through which they are passes like through the cilia, they are passed into the mouth. The next class is the cephalopoda. So gastropoda means the related to stomach, and so cephalopoda means head-foot animals. It includes octopi, squids, cuttlefish, and nautilus. So these are the examples of cephalopods. They are shell-bearing animals. So they have shell. They are mollusks with reduced shell. So although they contain shell, but their shell is reduced. They display vivid coloration. They are of very different colors, typically seen in squids and octopi, and this coloration is used for the camouflage. That is, they use this property to catch their prey in order to like to make false impression on the prey so that they can be catched. All animals in this class are carnivorous predators and they have beak-like jaws at the anterior ends. All cephalopods show the presence of very well-developed nervous system. They have well-developed eyes. They have a exception, as I was mentioning, that since all other mollusks have open circulatory system, cephalopods are the ones that have closed circulatory system. Fine. The foot is lobed and developed into tentacles, and a funnel which is used as their mode of locomotion. Suckers are present on the tentacles in the octopi and squid. Ctenidae are enclosed in a large mantle cavity and are serviced by large blood vessels, each with its own heart associated with it. The mantle has siphonophores that facilitate the exchange of water, just like that gastropoda. Locomotion in cephalopod is facilitated by ejecting a stream of water for propulsion. This is called as a jet propulsion, and a pair of nephridia is present within the mantle cavity. Very important thing is sexual dimorphism is seen in the class of animals, and sexual dimorphism means males appear differently than the females. Males appear differently than females. Members of a species mate, and the female then lay the eggs in a secluded and protective niche. Female of some species care for the eggs for an extended period of time and may end up dying during that time period. Cephalopods such as squids and octopi also produce sepia. So we know that squids or octopus you might have seen in cartoons as well, that they secrete dark ink as a part of their defense system, which is squirted upon the predator to assist in a quick gateway. Reproduction in cephalopods is different from the other mollusks in that the egg hatches to produce a juvenile adult without undergoing any larval stages. Like in earlier, we see that they have trochophore and veliger larval stages, but in this, it is direct and do not involve any larval stage. Egg is directly hatched into the adult without undergoing any larva. This larval stage is not there. So it is a direct development. Example includes squids are speedy carnivores with beak-like jaws and well-developed eyes. You can see here. Octopus are considered among the most intelligent invertebrates. We know this. Chambered nautiluses are the only living cephalopods with the external shell. We say in the starting that shell is present, but in most of the cases that is a reduced shell. So the chambered nautiluses are the only living cephalopods with an external shell. The last class is the Scaphoda. Members of the class Scaphoda, which means broad feet, are known colloquially as tusk shells or tooth shells. For example, Dentalium, which is few of the remaining scaphod genera. Scaphods are usually buried in sand with anterior end opening exposed to water, so they appeared as shell-like structure, and they have two openings. One opening is here and the other opening is here. These animals bear a single conical shell which has both ends open. The head is rudimentary, protrudes out of the posterior end of the shell. So this is the posterior end, this is the anterior end, head is present on the posterior end. Both feet, right? The animals do not possess eyes, but they have a radula as well as foot modified into tentacles with a bulbous end known as capticule. Capticule serves to catch and manipulate the prey. Ctenidae are absent in these animals as an excretory organ. So you can see here, they appear as the tusk of the animals, right? Dentalium, for example, Dentalium. So Antilles vulgaris shows the classic dentalidae shape that gives animals their common name as tusk shell, right? So they appear as tusk-like. So these are some of the examples which are mentioned in NCERT also. You need to remember the scientific name as well as the common name of these animals. For example, the Pila, apple snail, Pinctada, which is the pearl oyster, which is usually cultured in order to obtain the pearls. Sepia, which is a cuttlefish, Loligo, squid, octopus, devilfish, Aplysia, see here, Dentalium, which is a tusk shell, and Chaetopleura, which is the chitin. So we studied about chitin, Dentalium, we learn about sea here, we learn about octopus, squid, pearls, oyster, and apple snails. So we learn about these examples and how they belong to different classes, what are the characteristics of each and every class. And so with this, we end up in learning about the phylum Mollusca. And in the next class, we will take up the phylum Echinodermata. And if the time permits, we can also start with the hemichordata. So we will learn about what is hemichordates, what is the characteristics of echinoderms in the next class. With this, I would like to end today's session. Thank you all for attending it. Thank you.